Welcome to episode number 9 of Winning Ways, presented by the Washington State Football Coaches Association. And man, do we have a fun lineup tonight. We have a couple of phenomenal coaches from our state, and they happen to be father and son. And so there's a unique dynamic there as well. First guest here is Bob Lucey, and he served 31 years as the head coach at Curtis High School. While there, he was a 4-time state champion. In fact, he was the first coach at a large school, 3A or 4A, that won 3 or more. And he did that with two back-to-back titles, 89 and 90, and 95 and 96. In fact, in 2019, based on all of that success, but more than the success on the field, but what he did for the lives of people in the community, they named the field there at Curtis High School Bob Lucey Field. So he's recently received that honor in the last 6 years. He's also a member of Hall of Fames for the Washington State Football Coaches Association, the University of Puget Sound, as well as the Pacific Northwest Football Hall of Fame. In 2014, he was the Western Region National Football Foundation's Leadership Award winner, and he served some time as the former president of this very association, Washington State Football Coaches Association. And so thank you, Bob, for that service. And you know, we've continued on, and we thank you for the foundations that you laid with that. And then our other guest is his son, Nick Lucey. And Nick has 24 years of coaching, and he's in his 12th season as the head coach at Squalicum High School. He's been Coach of the Year award winner in Wesco. In fact, just last week, he was our most recent winner of the Seahawks Coach of the Week. He had a real big win, number 1 ranked, 2-time defending state champion, Anacorta Seahawks were on his schedule, and he knocked them off with a huge win. And so he's named Seahawks Coach of the Week just this last week. And so that's a little bit about their background and some numbers that they have there. And do either of you have any idea who has, though, the higher winning percentage in your career?
Definitely Nick.
Yeah, so I looked at the record for both, and Bob had a career record of 198 wins and 117 losses, which is 62.7%. And Nick is currently up to date, as he's 4-2 this year so far, 80 and 39, which is 67.2% winning percentage. So, yeah. So, Nick, maybe you don't have those titles yet, but you have the winning percentage record right now on Dad. And Bob, what year in your coaching was it that you won your first title?
1989.
Okay, and then do you know about how long you'd been the head coach there at Curtis at that point?
Yes, I think it was about 14 years.
Okay, so within 2 years, Nick, no pressure there, but that's the timeline right there, right?
Yeah.
So anything I missed out on kind of the bio from you as coaches there?
No. The only thing was I was the football rep and not the president of the association, but I was with Terry Ennis and Jerry Parrish, who were awesome to work with. So that I think you might have gotten that from when I received that leadership award from the National Foundation.
I did. I saw that listed in there.
Yeah.
Thank you for correcting the record on that. But again, thank you for your service on the board, and it's been awesome for us. So, yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome. I touched on the head coaching records. Bob also had a little bit of time right out of graduated from college. He went and was a volunteer coach, and then after that, he spent 2 years as the defensive coordinator at Curtis before he took over as the head coach. So took over as head coach as a pretty young guy, and Nick's assistant coaching and various other coaching is actually pretty extensive. So through his coaching career of the 24 years, 12 of it has been as a head coach there at Squalicum. Prior to that, a number of the things that Nick did was 3 years as an assistant at Pullman High School, and he did win a state title there, and that was in 2005. He spent 3 years as a graduate assistant at Washington State University with the Cougars, and then 1 year semi-pro over in Denmark. I'd like to hear about that in a little bit, probably some interesting stories about football in Denmark. And then he spent time as an offensive coordinator with Western New Mexico and Simon Fraser, and then that all led to his start there at Squalicum. So extensive coaching career prior to his time at Squalicum as well. So first question is, Bob, what would you say stands out to you as maybe your greatest memory from coaching at Curtis?
When the field was named after me. because it was not only named because of my success as a football coach, but for, the job I did as a teacher, but I was really involved in all areas of the community and still am, as far as promoting levies and bonds. It was just that, it was more than just coaching football. It was making a contribution and, a legacy.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, not a lot of coaches spend an entire career at one school. And so you just poured into that community. What more can you say about just pouring into one place like that and making it home, and especially when it's kind of rare these days?
Well, I was blessed and to have, I played at UPS, and one of the coaches at UPS, Dina Mannon, assistant coach, had been a counselor in University Place at Curtis. And when I started applying for jobs, it's one of the jobs that came up. But the one thing it was kind of like it was meant to be. I was hired as a junior high health teacher. And the first thing I noticed, George Curtis, who started this school district in 1927, was still the superintendent. And all the people working there had been there and had been a part of the University Place, which was a community and not a city at that time. And the school was the center of that community. And these people were caretakers in the sense that they took great pride in the school district. But just something that you were kind of caught up in. And I hit it at a real good time too. Kurt Bagby was the head coach, who was just an awesome man for me to have mentors, a teacher and coach. He was his first year, and got going with him, and we had some success. And it was just the fact that all these people, they now, having been in this community for 54 years, I'm getting the grandkids and of kids of former players, and it's just, this community still is. When it come time to do bonds and levies, we got another one coming up. It's just amazing how many people still, continue to come back to this area. And you ask them why it's not the town center of the city, it's the school system. So that's kind of where, I was.
Great. Nick, a couple of questions about your time at Curtis. One is, not as a player, because you did come through and you played. You were a quarterback on the JV team as a sophomore and a junior, and got a chance to be the guy as a senior, and then went on to small college football after that. But how about before you were a high schooler? Just growing up into it, seeing dad as a coach, and being ball boy and helping with equipment, any of the kind of stuff. What are some of your favorite memories as a kid being part of Curtis football with dad being the head coach?
It's funny you ask about that, because I got my 9-year-old son now has been coming to games for about 3 years, and kind of looking back through that lens of, what was that like? And I had I can't remember if my mom or dad sent it, but a video of me on the sideline at one of the games and just doing some of the same things that he does. You just like, they say being a coach's son's a little different, because things kind of how would I say it, revolve around the game, in the sense of, boy, you're on the sideline for the game, and everything's all about, like, you want to win on Friday, and you don't always win, but you kind of learn early to how would I say it, just kind of living as a coach that way, and going into the game with high hopes, and so much fun to be around. It's my favorite memories, being around just different players and interactions, and it's just a place I really enjoy being. I still enjoy being out there, and I don't really consider it like I have a job. Like, I get to do this. It's fun. And, hopefully I think my son's having a pretty good time doing that, but so many good memories being on the sidelines, obviously pretty darn good teams at that time. And, I learned a lot.
Yeah. Awesome. How about as a player, some memories that you had, and also if there was anything that was particularly challenging about playing for dad, and how he handled that in your opinion, and Bob, then I'll have you follow up with how did you handle coaching not only Nick but his older brother, is it Mike, as well?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So Nick, first, what was it like playing for Dad, and maybe some good memories of, your time as a high school football player, and then challenges and good parts about having Dad as the coach.
Probably the hardest part was the genes. You look across town and there's the Hewards and they're 6'3", 6'5", 6'4", and
Yeah.
I mean, heck, I'm 5'9.5", if I'm lucky, and I'm lucky if I break a 5'2", 40. But I kind of consider it one of my life shaping experiences, and a really gratifying thing, in the sense that, I was on a team my sophomore year that won a state championship, and I was, I think, the fifth or sixth string quarterback. Um, I was way down there, but and then I was a backup my junior year, and but I loved the game, and worked my tail off, and I learned so much just being around the game. I think it gave me a leg up to go win the starting position my senior year and go out and have a successful season. My dad being the defensive coordinator, coaching linebackers, I again didn't have a real aggressive bone in my body to go play defense. So it was a fun situation being out there with him. We're obviously are different, we're working on different sides of the ball, but I had a great experience. I wouldn't say there's really anything from a challenging standpoint. It was a great experience, and one that really shaped who I am today.
Right. Bob?
It was, Mike came in, and his first year as a sophomore was 1993, and we won the back-to-back state championship, and we had two really good teams after that. But because limited allocations, we didn't get in 91. We lost the Lakes early, and at that point, that was what took us out. And then the next year, it was kind of the same thing. And I mean, and Nick was talking about genes. I always told Mike Heward, if I'd married Peg, his wife, my two boys had played in the NFL too. But the thing about it was that it's tough, because Mike came in his situation, and we just didn't have anybody in the position that was back playing. His class was the class that basically won at 95, and if you could kept those kids all together as sophomores, but we probably had 4 or 5 of them that were starting. Aaron Best, who was at Eastern, is one of them, was an offensive lineman. And then the running back, Sam Gage. But with Mike, it was different, because he came in and we didn't have a quarterback, and Mike was the best choice and the one that coaches had the most confidence in. But for him, playing in the South Puget Sound, which is at that time felt consistently was from top to bottom one of the toughest leagues in the state, he got beat up, and it just, if I had it to do over, I wouldn't have played him, but we didn't have anybody to snap the ball. And Nick was there even as an 8th grader. He probably would have played if Mike didn't, but it was really tough, because it was really, if he could have been with that group of sophomores that were really good together, I think it would have been a better. Nick was perfect. I think sometimes kids playing right away as sophomores, it's really tough, because unless they're mature and they're really gifted, and then they have athletes around them. Nick had players around him, but he'd been around so long, it was like having another coach out there. And Mike was, like a lot of sophomores came there, he'd been around it and had been a part of the championships and all those things, but he was still physically, really young, and he got beat up, and then the next year he had some health issues. He had a back issue, and they found out about when he was place kicking, and he probably was going to be our kicker at 2, and he just cramped up after the first game when he was a sophomore, and took him, and he had 2 fractures of his lower back from crow hopping in baseball. So that was those 2 years he played, and he played as well as he could, but it was really hard, because I think we were 4-5 that year. It's a tough year coming off what we'd come off the previous 4 years. But he was sort of a real important part of the team and coming, and then he ended up splitting time with Salzman, and then Salzman kind of took over. But it was different. Nick came in. Nick was, he played 2 years of JV football, and he coached the kid when he was out there. And he used to watch film with me. He would break film down. When he was a senior, he was really ready, and he'd really worked on his feet. He had watched a lot of film, and he'd really prepared himself. But the kids that he was playing with, he brought to come up with a lot of them. And then there were the kids in the state championship the year before. It came together really well. Obviously, people always think the only reason you play your son is because he's your son. And that's why I coached the defense and had Don Lichte, who, really a tremendous coach, and the staff. They made the decision. I didn't make it. And it was one, if I made it, I probably wouldn't have done it the way I did. But it's, I think any coach is coach, unless your kids like the Heward boys when they came through. They're awesome. It's an easy choice, you know what I mean? But it's Dave Miller, with his son, but just you go through, and there've been a lot of coaches on the play. But next time and everything, we had a great season. Lost in the second round to Snohomish, and I remember kids, talked about the next year how different it was because Nick wasn't there, because he was the guy who would throw with them anytime they wanted to throw. He did everything. And watch film with them too.
Now, you mentioned something about allocations, and I found some things when I was doing some research that back in I believe in the 90s, you were pushing for a 32-team playoffs, which became something that I really started pushing for a few years ago. In fact, that was one of the big things that got me involved in the Coaches Association, was being in the difficult Northwest Conference. I had some pretty good teams over the years, but it was really challenging just to make it to state, because you've got state champions coming out every year with the Lindens and everybody, and so talk to me a little bit about your push back then, and one of the guys that you coached against, Dave Lutz, helped come up with the allocation system that we've had for years and years. So tell me about that allocation system and the fact that you were pushing for 32. We didn't get it until fairly recently, and then Nick, maybe you can speak to this as well. Playing in such a challenging league where there's state champions or that caliber of a team, maybe multiple in your league, and the benefit of adding some allocations that way around to 32, and also Nick, maybe on how that's made you a better coach playing in such a challenging league. So Bob, tell me about your experience trying to push for more allocations.
Well, Dave and I did this together. We played against each other in 1989, but we also were friends before we coached the All-State game. I think it was 84, 85 together, and became good friends. There isn't anybody that contributed any more to high school football than Dave. And what happened was I was really frustrated because, there was this scenario used to be down in the Southwest with Tumwater and Evergreen. Okay. Well, one year they played the first game of the year, and there was only they'd get one allocation. And so what happened was every other year, I think they got a half. Well, if you're in a system where the playoffs are what you're trying to get to, it just made, your season's almost killed, because the team that beats you has to lose 2 games for you to have a chance to get back in. And so Shidab and I talked about this, and in our league, the SPSL was very competitive, same type of thing. I felt I had probably 4 teams were good enough to get there and play. I mean, besides the 4 that did, and there was a 5th one that did in 87. But what I found when I was looking at trying to see this, when I go to the WIA, they say, well, we have to have our 14 days of practice. And yet in Texas and different places, I think they were down 12. Okay. In some places it was 10. But at the same time, you had the injury things coming up, and so that they kind of held line. We went from 9 games to 10 games, and in '73, because of the gas crisis, everybody cut back a game, and the basketball, the other sports too, they played multiple games in a week because of the oil crisis. Well, it didn't change anything for basketball, but it did for football. We still were playing 9 games, and what they did in '73 is they did give us our first state, but it was only I think 3 weeks. Okay, and so what happened was, and I was looking for something, and I found it. We never got the 10th game back, and we could play a 10th game, but we didn't. And so some of the coaches started playing a 10th game because they could. It's on the record. There's 10 games. Well, so Dave and I got together, and what we did is we made a proposal because the North and South divisions were one league, was that instead of we got 3 opportunities to get in, we would take and split them and go to 6, and we'd use that 10th game, which we could play, to be our game. And what we had to do is get the coaches to agree to, ones would play 3s across the divisions, and 2s would play 2s. And so, but 3 would go on. And so we started that. I think that started maybe in 93.
96 or 95.
Yeah, it was,
Before that.
well, 96 we were well into it, because in 96 we wouldn't have won the state championship unless we stepped that up, because we got in. We were a number 3 that had to play a 1, because that was the year we had like 3 divisions in the SBSL, and we beat Enumclaw, and so we got in, and then 95. We ended up playing Camp Marian to get in, but our game was against Tumwater, who was ranked number 1, and we actually beat him that first week. But that's kind of how it happened, and they took it even farther when they made the change on the number of days you need to have before you could play your first game. You remember the Kickoff Classic when that came in?
Yeah.
Well, when that came in, then what happened is they allowed they cut back to 12 days of practice, so that then they could get the Kickoff Classic in ahead of it. And this was the SPSL, Southwest, and the east side of the mountains too. They all jumped in with us, and after the first or second year, we ended up crossing over with them, kind of like to where it's gotten now. And the other thing is, there was an article in the Coaches magazine, like, 'cause I wrote it all up, was we went over in '87 and played Gonzaga Prep, and the gate was $17,000, and yet I had to come back and raise $2,500 just to go over and have our team be the show. Yeah, and I said, this is not right. And so what we did is we used these games that we'd set up, the crossover games and everything. Because when you look at them, when I wrote the article, I said, look, and as I look back on it, going back, 32 schools have had a chance to be in the playoffs. The newspapers start covering the playoffs, really covering everything, but the fans, the players, the coaches, and I had several coaches tell me, they said, Coach, what you and Dave did I probably wouldn't still be coaching, because I got into the playoffs and everything. It was great, but it was really hard to get in. But Dave then took that and administered everything there, and just a great man for high school football. Really.
Well, I have had a chance to talk a little bit with Dave, because when I was pushing for 32, and I'm still pushing for hopefully getting some at-large bids in there. But he and I chatted, and I did find a quote from him about you at one point in time. Says, there's a core of coaches in the state of Washington I have a deep respect for, and Bob is in that core. Said Dave Lutz, the former Kentwood coach who lost to Lucey in the '89 title game. That's nice to hear. He's just consistently produced excellent football teams, but beyond that, he's carried himself well in all other areas, which, I think probably all of us would rather have somebody say we're a good person rather than a good football coach. But Nick, You're in the Northwest Conference. It's challenging. Funny thing is, even though we were in the same conference, we missed each other a lot because you kind of were up in 3A and I was in the Cascade Conference for a while. So I've only actually coached against you twice. One, I had the misfortune of playing your 2015 team that went 11-1, and you hung 50 on us that playoff enter into the state game, and your team was loaded. But then in 2021, the year you went to the state semis, we knew there was only, I think, 2 bursts that were going to go in that year, and we already dropped a game somewhere, and we had to try and find a way to steal a game. It was pretty clear you and Linden were the top 2 teams, but we were looking to steal one. We've did some creative things. We snuck a game by and got you 14-13, but still, there wasn't enough bursts for us to get in. I think we had a state playoff caliber team. You probably could attest to that, but we didn't get in because there were just so many limited playoff opportunities. So tell me a little bit about what challenge it's been, and you've kind of been in both. You've been in the Westco, which there was more opportunities, and you've been in the Northwest Conference with the 2A. So talk to me about that and how it's made you a better coach even.
Yeah, it's tough. Like going into that year, that was pretty crazy. Going back to 2021, thinking there are 2 berths and there's going to be some good teams left at home. I'm glad our situation's gotten a little bit better, but I go back to 2023. Cedar Woolley had a team that I think could have maybe made the semis, and they didn't even make the playoffs because of what did they do? I think Linden beat them on a 2-point conversion. They'd been ahead, like, was it an over? I can't remember, but it's tough. And, every week counts. Again, going back to that 2021 season against you guys, like every week counts. And, man, that's tough. I'm grateful for having more berths. Like this year's a pretty good example. We've actually got 5 allocations this year, to get in, which is, if it were 2, in our league, there's usually at least 2 teams that are contending for the state title. So it's nice to have something to play for this late in the season. And you go through a bruising schedule, but it's a good thing too. It's fun because we get to play good teams week in, week out. There are no off weeks. I really feel like as a coach, that's made me a lot better. Been on like in the Westco where there's a little more variance between the top and the bottom, but the Northwest Conference is, that's tough. It's a fist fight every week.
Well, and you're looking at, if it was only 2 bursts, I mean, this year, just in your conference, you've got yourself, you've got Seaholm, you've got Linden, and of course, Archbishop Murphy. There's 5 teams right there that are all playoff caliber football teams. And thankfully, there's 5 bursts this year, alternating supposedly 4 or 5 unless something changes. So if it was last year, we'd only get 4, not 5. But
right.
But hopefully, we can keep this 32 going and maybe even get some at-large teams in there. Okay, now another thing I wanted to ask about is Bob was a defensive mastermind and Nick is an offensive mastermind, right? So you're the yin and the yang, and you mentioned genetics earlier, and Bob, 5'9", 195 pounds in college. So I was trying to guess, okay, I heard he was honorable mention All-American. Was he a running back or nose guard though? Nose guard at 5'9", 195. So must have been quick and tough. But Nick, you've had your dad help out, watching some film in the past, and from what I hear, some of your defense was what he used in the last 7 years or so at Curtis. So talk to me a little bit about, one's an offensive guy, one's a defensive guy. Nick, how you've used Dad to help out your program, and Bob, are you still helping out, or what's happened there?
I think coming up, I just learned to see things from a different side of the ball, see how he broke down offenses, look at it from a little different view, be able to, it's always fascinating to me to hear, what things as a defensive guy are really tough on you, what's tough to defend, what are the things that keep you up at night, and then you hear more also about players. But I didn't get the defensive mindset. So it was interesting when we became a high school head coach, and looking at what are we going to do defensively. And I talked to my dad a lot about his scheme, and coming back to it just made so much sense. And like that year in 2015 we were using basically my dad's defense we done, and it made so much sense and really put our kids in a position to be successful.
And I'll speak to that before, since you mentioned also when we played in 2021, um, I thought your defense was the best in the state I'd seen, especially against the spread. And I'd seen what you did
Yeah.
against Linden, for example. I was like, they're better at the spread than we are. We're pretty good, but we had lost our quarterback at the end of the week, the previous week. Didn't know if he was going to be cleared to play or not. We were going to have to maybe start
Right.
freshman quarterback. So we came up with same blocking schemes. We didn't change anything from new to our playbook that ways, but we went double tight, two backs, threw stuff at you that you hadn't seen. It's because we wanted to control where those outside backers were and have a little bit of control on that. And
Yeah.
defense, if we were in spread, we wouldn't have scored a point. I'm pretty sure you guys were loaded. You did a phenomenal job on that. And it was just something that you hadn't expected probably from us. But your defense has been absolutely solid. So, Bob, talk to me about how you helped maybe with watching game film with Nick early in his career and how involved you are now in bringing in that uh, basically 52 defense, right?
Well, it's actually kind of a combination. I played in the old, a 5-2 slant, and played for a great coach in Bob Ryan, who, was really very knowledgeable, and Paul Wallop, who was an assistant and then head coach. And it's kind of interesting. I ended up, I was a linebacker, and then I was also center. In those days, you played both ways, but you had an offensive position and a defensive position. If you were a starter, you had to be a backup so that you're ready. And actually, we had Nose, who was a senior, and I playing center, and I blocked him and went low because that's where I am. And he injured his knee. So I was really looking forward to playing as a linebacker. And they came to me and said, we want you to play nose. And after a quick assessment of my abilities, I wasn't real big. I wasn't real, the strongest guy in town. But I was fairly quick. And one of the things, the slanting, and then we used to do the 5-2 stack, which put your tackles in the gaps, a 3-and-1 gap. I really liked that. And then when I first started coaching, I coached the split six. So that was what Kurt wanted me, and it was good to learn that too. But it's kind of a combination, and this is one of the things is I really go into in the book I've written is that you need to have a criteria for your positions and understand what type of athletes you're looking for. And this is one of the things that Nick had his defense coordinator had left after, Nick, after that first year. He said, "Hey, are you interested in being my defense coordinator?" And I said, "I'm not moving up to Bellingham." And he said, "That's okay." But with being able to watch film, especially with Huddle now and those things, I basically what I tried to do was help with the coaches he had. But main thing was placing and was going to run what I run. Then he needed to put I had a criteria for the athletes that I looked for, and it was more about getting off the ball. It was a pressure front, and I found, because of my experience, the worst call that I could get when I was playing was nose, monster cover. Well, nose meant you jammed the center and you had to read his hat and see which way he went. And basically the teams we played at that time were Portland State. We played University of Hawaii, Montana, Sac State, the schools down there. And so I've played against kids big, but my quickness was an asset. And so what I'm looking for, and this is one of the things too, on YouTube, you can go, the state championship games are there, the 89, 90, 95, 96. And if you take a look at all four, coaches always ask me, how do you get your kids to play so fast? Part of it's getting them in the gap and then getting them off the ball. And that was from my playing, what I took to coaching. And so with Nick, he had athletes there. And I remember one in particular, I said, how about moving the defensive end? And what was his name, Nick?
Jake Burns.
Jack Burns. He said, no, he's my best kid there. And I said, well, geez, I really feel if you put him at nose, he can dominate there. And he just really made a difference there. I've always felt that you can disrupt, when
He ended up being All-State that year.
yeah, the thing about it was he had the right body, everything else, but you make it tough on the center, and with his athletic ability, quickness, it really changes things. And so if you take those 4 state championships and games and take a look at them, you'll see that in all 4 of them, the nose was only 5'8" and anywhere from 175 to 180 pounds, but they had a heck of an impact on all 4 games. And so that's where I felt you started, because the snap's crucial. And if you get the center playing at the conscious level, teams that are running spread and those things, and you get off on the ball, it creates a lot. Now they got to block you with 2 people, but kind of shortened up for you. But anyhow, so I did that, and I was able to work through him with his coaches. And I went to the camps and did those things with him. I was down there, but Nick does a great job of getting his staff ready to coach, and what happens when you lose coaches that have coached with you for a long time. You really got to go back and recreate the wheel and get them comfortable, but you have to be on the same page on what you're doing. And this is a part that it was really a joy to be a part of that. And he had a great group of kids too. I think his team this year is one that really reflects what a great job he does in bringing the kids along to play at the highest level. But size was never, the criteria was never about big kids. It was about athletes and quickness and being in better shape than the people we play.
I love that. And I think, it's interesting. Northwest Conference, again, you've got Linden runs a slant 50 and Squalicum has your own brand of it. And for a while we had Burlington and Cedar-Woolley were doing it too. You want to see good slant 50, you come up to Northwest Conference. There's some guys doing well.
Yeah, well, I've watched plenty of film, and it's for sure. And the one thing is that I kind of meshed the split 6 because they played the 2 tackles at 3 technique, which would be on the outside shoulder of the guards. And I really liked it. I just didn't like the linebackers being inside. But the other thing was, we won state champion with some kids who were 175 pounds that were athletes. And that's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
And Nick's, I had some really good kids that way. Peterson kid wasn't too bad. They played for that with him, and but it's a process of development. And that's where he's done a great job. He's done a great job of getting his staff ready to coach his kids, and there's continuity in what they're doing, and it shows up, and it's really starting to show up this year with the kids.
Absolutely. I always knew, getting a chance to prepare for Nick, you were going to have players that were very disciplined, well coached. They were going to have all the right schemes. So tons of respect coaching against Nick. One other thing on that slant 50 that I have grown to appreciate, haven't run it myself, although if I ever come back, maybe, I don't know, might have to talk to you guys, is it allows you to get different bodies on the field. And then maybe on your offensive line, you can have offensive linemen that really specialize for the most part on that. And you maybe can't always 2 platoon fully, but if you could get your offensive linemen to mostly just focus on that, and maybe, bring a big guy in for, short yardage situation or something. Another benefit I see from that as well. So, Nick, I wanted to talk to you about your stints before you were a head coach at Squalicum. One, I got to hear what your best story is from coaching in Denmark and what football was like over there. And then when you're thinking of that, the next question is going to be, you got to coach at the college level, grad assistant at Wazoo and OC at a couple different schools. How much of that could you bring down to coaching at Squalicum at the high school level? and how much did you have to simplify and leave out? So talk to me a little bit about best story from Denmark, and then going from college to high school, and what that transition was like.
Yeah, Denmark was a hoot. It was kind of it was a little bit of an analog for going from college to high school, because I had G'd at Washington State for the 4 years before, and I thought coming over, like, okay, we're gonna, it's a semi-pro team. We're gonna, kind of run like a college level offense, and you get there and go, okay, and there's some good football players there, but there's, most all of them speak English. Not everybody speaks great English, but most all of them do. But from a, how long they played football and all standpoint, so that was really formative for me from a coaching standpoint, having to, we have all these coaching catchphrases, and they mean nothing to people that are not, English as a first language. So you realize real quick, okay, I gotta make sure I teach, from step one. But probably my favorite story was our quarterback was out, and our backup was a wide receiver. Well, there's also in these clubs, it's a little bit like soccer clubs over here where they have different levels, and I was the head coach for the senior team. So basically like 18 and older. And they also had a flag football team. So our really good receiver, who also happened to be our backup quarterback, had a flag football game earlier that day, and we were farther up in Denmark in Aarhus, and he wasn't going to be there until the second half. So, you practice twice a week, so trying to get ready, so we get the running back ready to, play a little quarterback. And so obviously did we defer? I can't remember if we deferred or elected to, yeah, we must have deferred at the beginning of the game. So we kicked off, and then going into the second half, it's our choice. Our quarterback's not there yet. And it's I think, were we winning 7-0 or losing 7? It was a 1-score game, and I elected to kick off because our quarterback wasn't there yet. So, and he showed up, and I think we lost like 7-8 or something like that. But it was just, you just make do. These guys are all like, they're regular guys, and they have jobs. They might be working out on the oil rigs and be out for a couple of weeks at a time, or some of them have kids, and it was just cool. It was neat. It was a fun experience. But going back then to my experience coaching college ball, a lot of fun. I was really fortunate. I started off coaching my first year of high school ball when I got done playing under my dad at Curtis in 2002, and then went to WSU, and again, like, really couldn't have fallen into a better situation than coach with Bob Wallen over at Pullman High School, who's just been absolutely kind of formative in my development and kind of everything I've been around. And then I wound up at WSU. So that was cool to be there and learn from a lot of great coaches, see things on a whole different level, and kind of get to do that full time, and, and really, really learn ball. So, from there went to Denmark, and then got a chance to go be the offensive coordinator at Western New Mexico, a D2 school. And, you learn real quick, especially as an offensive guy, got all these great ideas, got all these great ball plays. Well, how the heck are you gonna build an offense, put it all together? I mean, heck, I got all practice to practice. We don't got to split it up, and you find yourself sometimes trying to be the jack of all and the master of none. And I thought I learned a lot over the course of my 4 years, and especially down in New Mexico. I was there for 3 years, and felt like I got a good feel for myself as a coach, and how to really narrow things down from a scope standpoint. And then taking that to high school was even a bit more of an extreme, and it's kind of like the filter of how much time you actually have, especially when you have so many kids that are two platooning, and you have your seniors that can do more, especially as they've been in the program, and then and then you got your younger kids that, you've got a younger team. You can ask them to do less. I think like you guys did. I remember loving watching what you did. I hated preparing for you because, oh my gosh, we spent a lot of time preparing still for Swinging Gate this year, but didn't see it. So it's just going to be force of habit. But, you learn that filter of how much you can do. And I thought that was kind of good, being able to combine some of the mindset of attacking that I learned in college. What kinds of ways do we want to put the defense in a bind, and different things we want to do to get the ball in places on the field in people's hands. But how do we narrow that down to only so many plays?
Yeah, you've done a phenomenal job to have very effective, high-powered offense. You can throw, you can run, you can have balance. But if you really look at it, there's not a lot of plays in there, right? And then you have a few specials that you pull out in key situations, and been very, very effective. So Yeah, I've been really impressed with everything in your program on that, Coach. Bob, I have a question for you. It deals with discipline. You know, maybe if players made mistakes, they did things that maybe it was at school, maybe it was something that's that hurt the team or whatever. Discipline. How did you deal with it? And maybe give an example of one thing that you did that worked really well, and maybe a mistake that you made along the way in disciplining your team.
Well, I think what happened with Dave Lutz in '88, he had a team that played for the state championship in '88, and the week before they had, a number of them that went to a party and he sat, they didn't play, and they ended up losing to Ingram. So I was real fortunate that Kurt Babby, who I started with, he was also my mentor in teaching his junior high. He was a PE teacher, but he was very upfront with the kids in the sense of what he expected of them, very consistent. But the one thing he taught me is priorities. And I remember him telling me that, and this is the same thing that I would tell my players. My priorities are in his case, my wife, my family, being a teacher in the school district here, the job I have, and coaching football, and those are the things that. And he said, I'm never going to do anything to embarrass you, and I expect the same from you. And so that's where I started, because I felt that it was a privilege to play football at Curtis High School. And the other part of it was I felt, and we have a Viking code, and actually some of it I got from Mike Price. But at the same time, we laid this out the first day with the kids, and probably the thing that this stands out, one of them that really stands out, is we had a young man who had just came from a family where there was substance abuse by both dad and mom. Mom ended up committing suicide, and so he's coming back off one of our championship years and had been a really good player. When she committed suicide, it just devastated him. And he was coming back. He was a really good player, looking forward to having an opportunity to go play. And he just couldn't sleep and eat. And basically, he started working out at a gym where he was exposed to steroids. And he started taking them. We found out his girlfriend came to the superintendent, Rich. And so Rich and I sat down and we had, hey, we're going to use our drug policy. And we went through that. But that was really tough because his situation was just so awful. And here he was really a good kid. And he was a good person and good, but he felt he needed to get a scholarship to go on. And because his dad was not really in his life at all. And so it was a situation that held the line, and the girlfriend had worked in the office, so she knew the principal real well, and she'd come to him and told, but he was at a gym, and it was interesting. I've been told by one of the sheriffs that we had a policeman on campus, and he said, hey, don't let your kids go to this place. But it turned out he had a great senior year and finished up, but it was something that the groundwork had been laid before, in the sense of how we did things at the school, and we had a procedure, and then the other things under the kids really put a lot on them being role models and being role models in the school and the things they did, and having priorities and going that way I feel that the most part. We had a situation with a quarterback. His mom and dad had died 1 year, 2 years prior, and one died a year prior. And this kid would, another situation, kind of, you try to have a home there, but the kids can use it or they can take advantage of it too. And so these are things you go through, but I think the best thing is you try and, if you're going to get something down, you have to deal with that. You can't come back and say, well, we probably need to think about it. The school should have a criteria. I mean, they have a process and there are things the kids, but at the same time, if you can get them to do it for the right reasons, because they do care about their teammates. And that's one of the things with the 4 state championship teams. They were totally committed to one another. And the one where the kid who I was talking about, they just embraced it, but they didn't know all of what was going on in his life. So
that's great. And so you mentioned the book. Before we started recording this, we talked a little bit about there's a book coming out that Bob is co-authored with Don Lichte called Football Symphony, and it's going to touch on those 4 state championships. Bob, when is that looking to be published where people can get their hands on it?
It's already go live. Right now, we're just working on getting the cover approved and then our final approved. Biggest thing right now is 85% of the paper for novels comes from China. So when I hear, tariffs going up another 100%, right, it's really slowed it down because they can't tell you what you're going to have to charge because they're not sure how much it's going to cost them to publish it. But it's supposedly in another month supposed to be published. But it's been just in the time talking with you and Nick, it's just been it's kind of what a lot of things we've talked about are in the book, and that's the thing I felt I wanted to write something that people would look at and they could take part, just like I did. I stole from everybody, like with Price had this code, a Cougar code, and I used, it was about the same, playing from the snap of the ball to the whistle, or you hear the echo of the whistle. But a lot of times the things that are really important are, the guideline, and it's not just the guideline for your players, your coaches too. And my expectation of the coaches, they needed to be a role model in the community also.
Right. So I heard a couple of words in what you just shared. Both start with a C. Your championship teams, there's something they held in common was commitment, uncommon commitment.
Yeah.
And then consistency, right? Whether it's your players or your staff. So
and it's doing little things. This is if you'd been over at WSU when we went over there, we did the little things. I told the kids, I expect you to flush the toilets because your teammate's going to use that toilet, or after you do. And so we had guys trying to come from the other teams to our floor because the toilets weren't good. But I expected them to pick up their trays and take care of that and take stuff back. Well, Mike Price comes to me and says, "Hey, your kids are even picking trays up for the other kids here," and it was, but they bought into it, and it was just, we always left the locker room in better shape than we found it, and it was you get them so they will do that and take care of each other. Now the rest of it gets easy, but if you got talent to go with it, and that's what if you talk to the kids, you would hear back that, I mean, these are their best friends, but these people really care about me. So the book's based on, going through it, the 3 things are trust, commitment, and caring. And it runs through how, when I first started teaching in high school, the principal, but he'd say, "Come up and walk with me." And so he'd be picking up paper, trash. And there wasn't very much to be picking up. Next thing I knew, I was picking up. And he said, "You know why I'm doing this?" And I said, "Because you want to keep the school clean and take care." And he says, "No, because we got a brand new building here." And he said, I'm so thankful. This is the least I could do for the community is give back.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I would love to talk a whole lot longer, but we're running up on our time, and I'm going to give Nick the final word on this. But Bob, you mentioned Mike Price a couple times. Sounds like you were teammates at UPS. I'm sure the stories, I'd love to sit down and talk. I'm sure they'd be amazing. But Nick, you get the final word today. I'd like 2 pieces of advice. One, what's the best piece of advice that you ever learned from your father? And if you were going to give a piece of advice to another football coach, maybe a young guy coming up, what would that advice be?
Oh boy. Okay. Coming from my dad, I've gotten so much that way. I think just trusting that you put everything you have into something and, put your, how would I say it? The best version of yourself forward. Put the work in, put something out there that you're proud of, and you're never going to regret it. You're never going to, walk away disappointed in yourself. And what more can you do? As far as for a young coach coming into the game, I would say, remember that I'm a big fan of the Dunning-Kruger effect. How do you say it? Humble yourself, and there's always something more to learn. I think there's so many great things out there online you can learn from and, learn quickly, but, like learn the small things, learn the system, learn the things that might not be, flashy and making it on like Twitter, look at this play, but, go learn a system, go learn, it all the way through, go learn how to coach it, go learn, I'm a big believer that you might have a system, but your thing needs to be, how do we fix it? How do we have answers? Knowing things on a whole different level than, just having ball plays and things that you like.
Awesome. So be a lifelong learner and you can always get better, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for this time. Thank you for your dedication to the sport and what you've done for it in our state and for your own communities. Thank you.